them up here. Hey guys, we are live coming to you on the Vinyl Rundown channel, and today we have a very special guest, Mr. Aidan Levy, coming to us from Pennsylvania. How are you doing today, Aidan?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So Aidan has taken on the massive task of writing the most comprehensive biography of the great Sonny Rollins. The book is called, see if I get this right from memory, Saxophone Colossus, The Life and Music of Sonny Rollins. There it is. It is a massive tome because he's done a ton of research. It's over 700 pages. And you started working on this how long ago?
About 7 years ago.
7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And just by coincidence, you and I were both kind of working on meeting a lot of Sonny Rollins related people. I was doing it in anticipation of his 90th birthday, which was what, 2 or 3 years ago? So Sonny's now
a couple of years ago.
2 or 3. So before we get into a lot of the details, I noticed that this is your third published book, and you've already or more than that.
Well, I wrote another biography that came out, I guess 7 years ago now, right before I started on this one. That was a biography of Lou Reed, and
Right.
I edited a collection of interviews with Patti Smith for a series of books that the publisher Chicago Review Press does. That's a Musicians in Their Own Words series.
Got it. Those were the two I was going to mention, Lou Reed and Patti Smith, but technically Patti Smith was more of an editing than an authorship. But I'm just curious, three icons of the New York music scene. Is there something that connects those three names together, or something that interests you that they all have in common? How did you end up with those three? Maybe it's just random.
Well, it's not random exactly, but the connections, I would say, are primarily just that I'm big fans of all of their music and their work. So I wanted to know more. I wanted to learn more. And I ended up turning what I learned into these books. There are some connections, like I can tell you with Lou Reed that he was a Sonny Rollins fan and he skipped the part of the release party for the Velvet Underground reunion album to go and see Sonny Rollins at Carnegie Hall. So,
well, see, that's a great story. I had no idea that somebody that's sort of, punk underground would be a fan of Sonny. So that's a cool little anecdote. So you're a sax player, and why Sonny Rollins of all the people? Is there a reason why Sonny was the person you wanted to spend the last 6 or 7 years working on?
Well, for one, the best answer I could just give is Sonny Rollins. I mean, who out there can touch Sonny Rollins?
Right.
He's the Saxophone Colossus. But I've always been inspired by Sonny's music, and I started playing the saxophone when I was 9 years old, and soon thereafter discovered Sonny. And I've been, a devotee of his music for a long time now. Well, since then, I should say. And I felt that there hadn't been a biography that was comprehensive, and I was hoping to read one. I'd read all the books on Sonny, and they're all great. So, I'd read Saxophone Colossus, a portrait of Sonny Rollins, the photo book by John Abbott and the great Bob Blumenthal. There's Open Sky, the book by Eric Nissenson. There's The Cutting Edge by Richard Palmer, and many others. And like I said, those books are all great. I wanted to do something different to add to that pile.
There wasn't a big enough book out there, so you had to do it yourself. So yeah, that's a good reason. I interviewed John Abbott, the photographer, and I guess didn't come up that he had done a book or co-authored a book about Sonny.
Oh, that, I really should have had that book out here for this interview, but you can all look it up. You can all look it up right now, and it's a beautiful book. John Abbott is a brilliant photographer. Bob Blumenthal is a brilliant jazz critic. So I would say if you're a Sonny Rollins fan, this book is indispensable.
Yeah, John Abbott has photographed everybody, every world leader you can think of, and Sonny Rollins. So you interviewed something like 200 people for this, I think. Is there anybody that stands out as being the most interesting or fascinating besides Sonny?
Besides Sonny,
We'll get to Sonny afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah. So Sonny Rollins, first and foremost, but other interview subjects include
Any surprising names and you have some, interesting facts or
Jimmy Heath.
Jimmy Heath, bass player, right?
Jimmy Heath, the saxophonist Jimmy Heath, pianist Randy Weston. So one aspect of the book, and coming out now, is that many of the people I interviewed have passed on. So, I'm glad that I could include them in this story because they're part of the story. And this book focuses on Sonny Rollins. He is, of course, the subject of the book, but the book also tells the story of a much broader community. Primarily what we would think of as the jazz community, but it also spans visual art, film, literature, et cetera, et cetera. Sonny Rollins is that large of a figure. So other interview subjects include, Candido Camero, the great conguero, who recorded with Sonny on the album What's New. And you can listen to Bluesongo and Jungoso, those tracks, which are incredible. I mean, this is turning into this answer almost like a roll call of figures who passed on. But
did one stand out who was like fascinating and had something surprising or interesting to say? That was really.
I mean, honestly, I can't say that there's just one that stands out. Everybody stood out in their own way. Everybody had a different angle and experience. So I mean, their insights were always moving and enlightening. But yeah, like I can't say that there's one interview subject that was the most standout. But there were people that I got to talk to that not many people maybe are aware of in jazz history, like the drummer David Lee, who performed with Sonny in the 70s. And
don't know him.
David Lee. So you'll learn about David Lee, and he also worked with Dizzy Gillespie. I'll give a shout out to Eric Wyatt. I know you've interviewed him as well. So, an honor to speak. He may even be out there tuning in right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, the great Eric Wyatt, and Sonny's his godfather. Sonny was very close with Eric's father, Charles Wyatt, who is also a great saxophone player.
I wanted to get into the bridge area, which to me is one of the most fascinating sort of anomalies of his career. But prior to that question, which I'll ask later, Charles Wyatt, I don't know if he had recorded music. I mean, I know about him from the Sonny story, but I don't know if there's any existing recordings of him. I don't know if you happen to know that.
Not that I'm aware of. We'd have to ask Eric, but
Eric,
I think just photos.
Right. Yeah, that's a shame that we don't have a record of his playing. Well, let me switch to a couple other questions here, because I got a long list of questions here. Don't worry. Yeah, so I do want to ask about, you got to meet Sonny himself. Did you meet him in person, and what was that like?
For this book, the interviews we did were over the phone,
Oh, okay.
and
That's
a
what it
lot of them took place during the pandemic, so that just
Uh-huh.
made it very difficult.
Harder, yeah.
But you know, so yeah, we mostly talk by phone, and it was always inspiring to get to speak with him. Um, just
Well, what kind of person is he? I mean, I have my own opinion, but from your interviews with him,
he's
how do you describe him?
he's a deeply spiritual person.
Hmm.
Um, but I would say, of course, also he's a genius. He's a very generous person, very thoughtful, perceptive, and compassionate person. He
Hmm.
um, really cares about the people that he knows, and he's close with a lot of people, but he also asks about their families too, and that's something that came up in interviews throughout my research for this book. So um, Sonny is just a very unique and brilliant individual, but I think that not everybody is aware of how compassionate he is. So
Yeah. Other people I spoke to had similar comments that he's very warm and personable, and a lot of jazz greats are sort of not, you know, sort of the opposite of Miles Davis. Uh, Somebody who's is just genuine and warm and friendly and caring. So that's you had similar experience. Like, did he ask about your family, and did you get it into that sort of personal relationship with him, or maybe not? I mean, what kind of
uh, yeah, I mean,
like
and
your
just
friends know?
apropos of Miles Davis,
Hmm.
I would also just say that um, by all signs, Miles Davis had a very different public persona from how he was in
Hmm.
private with people.
Hmm.
And, you know, uh, Sonny had a different relationship with him than what might be evident. I mean, they were very close, and, he found Miles to be a caring person. Obviously, there are stories about Miles Davis, but, well, I think one of the things about Sonny is that um, you get a good sense from his public persona of how deep a thinker he is, and as I said, how compassionate he is in his personal life. However, I think that what sometimes is lost is just that he's a private person, but just because you're a private person doesn't mean that you know you're not close with people, that you're not um, caring, like I said, compassionate. So,
Hmm.
you know, but yeah.
Well, let's dig into some of the things that he was passionate about, or as a thinker about. And I should use him in the present tense because he's still very much with us. One thing that came up in, I think, the liner notes or the press release is that he was interested in civil rights, and I'm not really aware of what his involvement was there. One quote I saw in the book was he said Paul Robeson was one of his superheroes, which I didn't know. Can you elaborate on either that relationship or what Sonny's involvement in civil rights movement was?
Well, yeah, Sonny was involved in the civil rights movement practically from birth. His grandmother, Miriam, was a follower of Marcus Garvey,
Hmm.
and she also took him on marches up Lenox Avenue in Harlem for causes like the great Paul Robeson or the Scottsboro Boys. And anytime there was a march, they would be out there. The family was politically engaged, and Sonny's civil rights education and education in social justice, like I said, started very, very early. There's this story that Sonny Rollins learned about civil rights from Frank Sinatra when Sinatra came to his high school, Benjamin Franklin High School, and gave a lecture to quell civil unrest. And although that did happen, that's not how Sonny Rollins learned about civil rights. Also, Nat King Cole came to the school as well, right at the same time. So
what year would these have been in? Well, I could probably
this
do the
this would
math.
be in 1945.
Okay. Frank Sinatra, who was just, I guess just emerging on the scene, he was maybe pretty well known, but that's kind of amazing to have somebody like Frank Sinatra show up at your high school.
Yeah, and then later Sonny recorded The House I Live In. But the one album that really defines Sonny Rollins' commitment to the civil rights movement is called Freedom Suite. And that is a 1958 album with bassist Oscar Pettiford and drummer Max Roach. There it is. And
I think this is an alternate cover that's not the same as the cover that most people are aware of.
Yeah, and that was issued a few times. So it was also reissued by Riverside as Shadow Waltz. And that downplayed the liner notes that Sonny wrote for that album, which is a beautiful and succinct message that he wrote himself. The Freedom Suite is the first civil rights themed album of the hard bop era.
Really?
And it directly inspired the Freedom Now Suite by Max Roach and Abby Lincoln.
Right.
So
that record was just re-released, I think.
Yeah.
So this copy does not have Sonny Rollins liner notes. It has Frank Kofsky,
Yeah.
Frank
Kofsky is a great writer and thinker. And he actually has a section in one of his books on the Freedom Suite album. So that's worth seeking out as well.
I think I need to get you're saying if I get a different version, I'll have Sonny Rollins' own liner notes.
If you get the original version of Freedom Suite. Yeah.
So two comments have come in from viewers. One is Eric Wyatt himself, who said, unfortunately, he doesn't have any commercial recordings of his father, but he does have maybe some tapes of him and Sonny practicing together. So
wow.
Maybe Eric, we can, they might not be good enough to publish as an LP, but I'd be happy to help you get them up on either your channel or my channel, just as the audio file. So if they're worth hearing, you tell me. So Eric, we'll chat about that sometime. Here's a comment that just came in from YouTube. Since you mentioned Mac Roach, was there some issues or a falling out between Max and Sonny that you're aware
of? Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of. Sonny was always close with Max Roach, and although I think they didn't see as much of each other later on, I know that Sonny holds his friendship with Max Roach very dearly and has mentioned that to me many times. So yes, no, I think that what Sonny has talked about a little bit of friction perhaps after his album Sonny Rollins +4 came out, and that was not Sonny's title. That was assigned to the record. That was given by the record label. And Sonny feels that maybe there was some friction there because Max Roach and Clifford Brown were the band leaders. And then Max Roach did Max Roach +4 afterwards. So
record companies do that without anybody's, input necessarily. So
yeah,
not the artist's fault. So one of the most interesting phenomenons in my mind is the bridge period, and I want to discuss that, but I noticed the book is part 1 and part 2. The bridge is right there in the middle. So it is the bridge of the book, metaphorically, and it is the bridge of his career and the bridge that he stood on. So I have many questions about the bridge period. So for those who don't know, Sonny took a hiatus from music from what was that, like 2.5 or 3 years?
1959 to late 1961.
And that happens to be one of the most sort of critical and important periods in jazz recording history. Some people say 1959 was the sort of the pinnacle year when, Kind of Blue came out and Mingasao and Dave
Giant
Brubeck,
Steps,
Giant
Time
Step.
Out.
So, like, while all this was going on, do you have an explanation or opinion on why Sonny stepped out of the music scene for all that period?
Well, it wasn't in response to the sudden profusion of what would become classic albums.
And I was just commenting that he missed out on recording during that period, so he has no recorded work during those 2 or 3
Right,
years.
right, of course. Of
Not
course.
that he didn't know that was happening.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, it didn't become apparent until later on, So,
But in retrospect,
yes, we don't have commercial recordings from Sonny during that period.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, the history of jazz can't be told just as the history of jazz discography, and just as those albums that came out and were recorded in 1959 did not come out of nowhere, that there was a lot in the background leading up to them. The activity continued, and the same goes for Sonny. It's not like John Coltrane suddenly made Giant Steps and wasn't doing anything prior to that. Everything Giant Steps was a culmination of everything he had done before, and so on and so forth for subsequent recordings. So the bridge period for Sonny was less a response to anything going on in the commercial world or in the music industry than it was a response to his own internal struggle for self-expression. It was a response to industry pressure insofar as Sonny was considered by the critical establishment at that time the greatest tenor saxophonist of his generation. And he didn't feel that he lived up to the hype. So one lesson that I take from Sonny Rollins' story is to not listen, not give too much credit to what other people say, that you have to always also check in with yourself and how you're feeling about what you're doing. That sometimes the critics will be supportive of what he's doing and he won't buy it. He thinks that he wasn't playing well, and the critics say this was the best I've ever heard. So what Sonny said, if you give me a good review when I'm not playing well, how can I trust you when you give me a bad review? Goes both ways.
So he literally got bad reviews leading up to 58, 59.
Well, that's not the bridge period. It was, like I said, really more a response to the fact that everybody was saying Sonny Rollins is the greatest tenor saxophonist of his generation.
They're saying he's up here, and he's like, wait a minute, I'm not up here. I'm just here. I got to work hard to get up here.
Right. He wasn't living up to his own expectations.
Right.
Although the question of whether he got bad reviews, yes, early on in his career, he faced harsh criticism from Downbeat and major critics like Nat Hentoff. It's not like overnight he burst onto the scene and everybody said, oh, here's the great Sonny Rollins. When he started out, there were many harsh rebukes of what he was doing. It wasn't until later on that everybody began to realize who he was. So Yeah, there's that aspect of the story as well. But the bridge period, Sonny was looking deeply into himself and focusing more on inner growth. So his spiritual development, his emotional development and well-being, mental health, his physical health. When he was out there on the bridge, he was doing pull-ups. It's not easy to carry a saxophone out there to the center of the Williamsburg Bridge. I've done it several times, and
You've
every
done
time
it
I
as an homage to Sonny, or you wanted to experience what it was like to play out there, or
yeah,
you
I
just had
thought
to cross the
if I'm going to do this book, I've got to go out there and see what it's like to play in the middle of the Williamsburg Bridge.
I
Now,
think
I had a
that sounds
baritone
like
saxophone at the time. I
oh,
mostly play
that weighs a
baritone.
ton.
I play tenor as well,
Yeah.
but I've been mostly playing bari for a long time now. And anyway, just lugging a saxophone out there, I was winded, and that was Sonny's experience every day. Like I said, doing chin-ups out there on the bridge by an abutment.
And I saw that part in the book. I read, a few pages of this long book, but I did concentrate on reading a few pages from the bridge, and it talked about his interest in self-improvement, physical exercise, diet, spiritual. So maybe what the record listening public doesn't see is he was working on Sonny as well as his music.
Mm-hmm.
He was spending maybe many hours not just playing, but working on all the things that I should be working on after the holidays: losing weight, getting in shape,
Oh,
getting a
sure.
better diet, and kicking off the alcohol and the candy. So really,
Sonny
the luxury
Rollins.
of life.
Sonny Rollins is somebody who, when he makes a resolution, he sticks to it, and he doesn't
I
only
wish
do it at New Year's.
I could do that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
So
that's amazing. Yes, I don't think people are aware of how deep he went into all that. Call
and
it
he
clean
wrote
living.
he documented it. He
Hmm.
documented it in terms of what he was practicing at the
Hmm.
time. He was writing, journaling, writing essays during this
Hmm.
period. He wanted jazz to become a real positive force in the world, which
Hmm.
it always was, but it didn't always have that public perception.
Well, it had
So,
public perception of speakeasies and heroin and
right, and that's not how the musicians felt about themselves, but that's how
smoky
much of the
clubs.
public felt. And Sonny
Right.
wanted to change that perception, and uh, he did. So, a lot of what he was doing out there on the bridge dealt with his inner growth and development, but there was also this aspect of working on himself so that when he did return, he would be ready to transform how the public felt about jazz.
Hmm. Well, how much did that influence either the public or his playing? I mean, what do we think were the results of that?
So when Sonny came down from the bridge, not everybody heard the difference. I happen to think that you can really hear the last vestiges of a strong Charlie Parker influence
Hmm.
being kind of shedded at that point. So when he was in the woodshed there that was really, I would say, uh, a pivotal period for becoming Sonny Rollins, and he found his voice much earlier. However, there still was more of this influence of Charlie Parker, which remained throughout the rest of his career. But some of what we hear in terms of his um, harmonic vocabulary and his rhythmic vocabulary, I think, does shift when after the bridge period, and I go into that in the book. But yeah, also just as I said, how he felt about himself.
Hmm.
That when he came down from the bridge and finished that sabbatical, he felt more confident that he could do what he wanted to do on the saxophone. He was always searching for that, what he referred to as the lost chord, but he, I think he was closer to it after the bridge period. I also
So-
want to just take a moment to say, for anybody out there who doesn't know, that there is a campaign to rename the Williamsburg Bridge the Sonny Rollins Williamsburg Bridge. It started by Jeff Caltabiano, and it's called the Sonny Rollins Bridge Project. And I'm hoping that that bridge gets renamed sooner rather than later. I'm confident that it's going to happen, but I hope it happens soon.
I did a full interview with Jeff during this period, and I haven't checked on the progress yet. It kind of is a lot of political wrangling within New York and all that stuff. But somebody should just go slap the sticker on it anyway, whether the city says to or not. To all of us, it's the Sonny Rollins Bridge.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, just get out the spray can. Another message from Eric here. Let's see if I can find it, because he didn't put it in the Eric. The YouTube chat is a better way, but that's okay. I'm reading it on Facebook. So Eric wants to chime in, if you don't mind. Sonny's need to go to the bridge. He felt with Ornette Coleman, new music, Coltrane, the new creations harmonically, he just couldn't accept. He was the top man. He didn't believe the hype about himself as what was being written.
Yeah, I mean, so he was responding to what Coltrane was doing and what Ornette Coleman was doing. He definitely checked out Ornette Coleman when he came in '59, and around the time that The Shape of Jazz to Come came out. But there wasn't a bitter rivalry there, and that's something that I want to make sure nobody out there is thinking. It's not that Sonny Rollins had any resentment for Ornette Coleman or John Coltrane. It was, if anything, a friendly rivalry. Sonny met Ornette Coleman in 1957 when he first came to California. That is, when Sonny first came to California. That's when he recorded Way Out West. He met Ornette Coleman, and they went and were practicing on the beach in Malibu. Sonny, when he heard Ornette, instantly recognized that Ornette was part of the lineage that includes Louis Armstrong and Charlie Parker. There was not any question for Sonny Rollins that Ornette Coleman was deep in that tradition. And so, yes, he was responding to what he heard with Ornette's group. And he also worked with Don Cherry and Billy Higgins, who were part of the Coleman group. So, but anyway, I just want to say, though, that once again, it wasn't a question of resentment or rivalry or being pushed out from being the quote boss. I think that Sonny is deeply opposed to the idea that there can only be one.
To him, it's not a competition.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's the way maybe some people view any creative, whether it's books or art or music. Sonny's doing his thing. He respects other people. They don't play the same style. They have their own styles. But I'm not trying to be number one. I think that's the feeling I get from Sonny, is being humble and embracing. And of all people. But there are some people out there who's, I want to be number one. There are some people like that. And again, Miles comes to mind. But anyway, that's a different perspective. And when we get into award season and who's winning the award and who's not winning the award, well, Sonny's won all kinds of awards, but he would probably tell you, thank you for the award, but that doesn't take away from what all you other great people are doing.
Well, Sonny Rollins didn't win a Grammy until he was in his 70s. So,
what record was that for, or was that a Lifetime? What record was that for?
That was This Is What I Do. That was his first. Yeah.
Wow. Well,
I have a great photo that comes from the Sonny Rollins archive at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture
Mhm.
of Sonny Rollins' 2 Grammys for This Is What I Do and the 9/11 concert
Mm.
on it. And in front of the awards is his cat. All you can really see is the cat sleeping in front of the Grammys. It's a
That's
great
all that
photo.
matters. Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, the Grammys, I mean, we could do a whole episode on, the concept of a popularity contest versus artistic achievement. That's another whole sort of bugaboo with me. Do the Grammys even mean anything in the greater scheme of things? But glad to know he finally got his. Okay, a couple other questions. So, do you happen to have a favorite either period or album of Sonny's that is your personal favorite, or one or two favorites that you want to mention?
I don't have a personal favorite, but I can discuss a couple albums. So the first I'll talk about is Way Out West,
Hmm.
um, which I love, and I'll just talk about a couple albums where I was able to hear the outtakes
Hmm.
and all of the studio chatter
How did you get
going.
the chance to be that lucky?
Well, I can't reveal my secrets there, but
Okay, I guess they were
uh,
legal,
well, they have not. It's not commercially available, but
right?
I felt that it's important for the biography, and I think it gives insights into the making of these albums and also the strength of character of the musicians involved. And for Way Out West, when you hear the outtakes and the studio chatter, you really get a sense that that album was made in the middle of the night from about 3 a.m. to maybe 10 a.m. They all had scheduling conflicts, and that's the only time they could do it. And by they, I'm referring to Sonny, bassist Ray Brown, and drummer Shelly Manne. And you can
And what
hear
which year was
Sonny.
this, by the way? Is this
This is
pre or
1957.
pre-bridge?
1957, Sonny
Hmm.
Rollins' first trip to California, which he took with Max Roach, then the Max Roach Quintet. This is after the tragic death of Clifford Brown in
Mm.
1956. And they continued on as the Max Roach Quintet. And they were booked in California, in Los Angeles, for what was Sonny Rollins' first trip out west. And Contemporary Records wanted to make a recording with Sonny. That was the label run by Lester Koenig. And his son, John Koenig, has taken up the mantle of his legacy. And we got to work together on the Rollins and Holland album that you showed earlier in this broadcast. So it's 1957 and it's the middle of the night. And you can hear in the outtakes these brilliant musicians working out what they're going to be doing on this classic album. Nobody would have any idea that it would become a classic at that time. I mean, it's the middle of the night, and you can hear as the night wears on that they start to get a little loopy at times. You can hear Shelly Manne working out how to make the drums sound like a galloping horse or like a canter. It turns out that Shelly Manne had a lot of experience with horses. They
Mm.
didn't realize that until
Mm.
they got there. So that was fortunate. You can hear Ray Brown working out different tags, and you know you can hear them discussing what they might title a couple pieces. And the thing about when the thing about these outtakes when I heard them is that they're all great. They really are. But it gives a deeper sense of the vertiginous atmosphere behind this. And I think I end that chapter with the idea of them kind of riding off into the sunrise
Well, it presents itself as an unusual album because here's a New York jazz master wearing kind of a hokey cowboy outfit, right? It's like way out west. It's funny in one sense, and I think they're playing some tunes that have sort of Western themes. So there's the whole cowboy aspect, but I didn't realize he had traveled to California for the first time and made it more
Yeah. So
appropriately.
it's made in California, and Sonny loved westerns. Herb Jeffries, The Bronze Buckaroo,
Mhm.
material like that. I mean, he grew up on westerns, going to the movies. So when he records "I'm an Old Cowhand," uh, it's not mocking that
Mhm.
tune. This is a tune that he loved, and
I,
it's a
I
tune
noticed
where he knew the lyrics. Um,
that
so
those of us of this younger generation back then, you would go to Saturday matinees or even any day of the week matinees, and cowboy movies was like 60% of the movies might have been Western.
mhm,
So there was
mhm.
a whole generation of people that grew up on cowboy movies that you and I, you know, didn't
Yeah,
didn't. He
and
also mentioned in the
the
book that he listened to a lot of hillbilly music growing up,
he
which
listened
kind
to
of
that as well.
surprised me.
Herb Jeffries, whom I just mentioned, um, was unique in that he was a black star in westerns,
Hmm.
and so that's somebody that Sonny witnessed growing up as a hero, and Sonny is cast in that role on this album, Way Out West. It also is um, just a brilliant statement of what can be done with a pianoless trio that is with no chordal instrument. So there's no guitar and there's no piano in that
Hmm.
group. You really have to be on the ball in order to do that. Fortunately, he had two of the best to ever do it, Ray Brown and Shelly Manne. So this album also, I think, uh, disputes the perceived rivalry between East Coast and West Coast.
Hmm.
There's not a moment on that album when when I feel like Ray Brown and Shelly Manne aren't cutting it, aren't keeping up, aren't keeping the pace. Um,
Well, those are
it's
two LA cats, if you will.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. But
Shelly Manne
there's
had his own club here in Hollywood for years, and
Shelly's
Ray Brown,
Manhole,
right?
and Sonny did record another album for a contemporary that did include um, a chordal instrument. Well, actually had Victor Feldman and Hampton Hawes, Sonny Rollins, and the contemporary leaders. So, um, but this album, I think, uh, just really shows what he could do in that context, and in part from that album, it's become a uh, a measure of just about anybody, especially somebody who plays a saxophone, is to play in that setting, a
The
pianist trio.
trio setting, yeah, I mentioned that in a
Uh,
couple of my other videos, that the
mhm.
trio setting was something that it's like playing without a net. You're out there,
Exactly.
you're covering all of the melodic and harmonic material yourself. You're front and center, and probably not that many people were brave enough to do that back then. Um,
Yeah, I mean, so the part of the title "Way Out West" and that iconic image on the album is just to say this is a new frontier.
mhm.
And there
New
were people who had done
frontier.
it. Yeah, there were people who had done it before, like
Mhm.
the great Lucky Thompson, but Sonny really, I would say, codified what it meant to play in a saxophone, bass, drums trio. He also does that in A Night at the Village Vanguard. We could go on. Freedom Suite, same instrumentation. Um, Another album I want to talk about is Sonny Meets Hawk with Coleman Hawkins, one of Sonny's early saxophone idols. He
And
met. Coleman
I'm sorry, what's the
Hawkins.
album called? I'm not sure I'm familiar with it.
Sonny Meets Hawk.
Oh, Sonny Meets Hawk.
Sonny Meets Hawk. This is an
Right.
RCA album. And Sonny first met Coleman Hawkins when he was very young, and he had an 8x10 glossy done by a photographer named Kriegsman. And he took it out and just waited in front of Hawkins' apartment, knowing that eventually the great man would return from work.
Mm-hmm.
And he did. Sonny got his signature, and that was that. He also used to see Hawkins driving around the neighborhood in his Cadillac, and he worshipped Hawkins as soon as he heard his recording of Body and Soul, where Hawkins does not play the melody. This is recorded in 1939 and set a new standard for improvisation. So
I'm trying to bring up the picture of it on screen. So
yeah, so we fast forward a couple decades, and now Sonny is able to record an album with his hero. And this is another album where I was able to hear the outtakes.
Sorry wrong with the.
I think that there's this anxiety of influence, to use a well-known expression here, of just how will Sonny define himself in a recording studio when he's standing next to his hero, someone who's so influential on his own sound. And you can hear him really going beyond the frontier that he explores in Way Out West on this album. And in part, that's to individuate himself. Also, it's recorded so that you can hear Sonny and Hawkins on different speakers, or now, it's
right channel, left channel,
left channel. So you can hear it, but the idea was for Sonny to differentiate himself here, but also pay tribute to Hawkins. And in the outtakes, at one point, you can hear Hawkins comment to Sonny and essentially say, "I wasn't feeling the beat on that take that we just did.
Mm-hmm.
You got to feel the beat. You got to feel that in your heart." And read that passage in the book, because I found that moving. To me, it was just a great moment, and a lesson that I think Sonny carried for the rest of his life. That I think that he still feels that sense of connection to Hawkins. And
was he intimidated by being with Hawkins, or
I wouldn't say
did he get along and gel?
I don't know if he was I wouldn't say he was intimidated, but I'm sure that there was some nerves going into it, because Hawkins is his hero, and he knew Hawkins, and Hawkins respected Sonny Rollins.
Mm-hmm.
But to stand next to your hero and have to trade, I mean, that's a tall order. So
that's intimidating. But again, this is after 3 years of bridge treatment and getting your confidence and your skill set. So maybe he felt like he might not have even wanted to tackle that before the bridge, and after the bridge, he was ready to go at it. So that's
yeah. I mean, also he had Paul Bley in that group,
mm-hmm.
the great pianist Paul Bley, and Paul Bley's solo on All the Things You Are is just one of the greatest solos in the history of jazz.
Yeah. This is a record that I'm not familiar with. I mean, I think I've seen the cover, but I don't think I've heard it, and it's kind of. That was going to be one of my last questions to you, is to show us a record that maybe needs more attention. And I think I think that's the one that
I think Sonny Meets Hawk does deserve more attention. It has been a polarizing album for some. I love it. I think that Henry Grimes plays beautifully on Summertime, which is a take that was more or less salvaged by the producer George Avakian, whom I also interviewed for this book when George Avakian was 98 and he was still lucid. Because there's something about this music that keeps you in touch with the world and keeps you, I think, thinking clearly. And, Avakian worked with Sonny throughout that RCA period. But yes, Sonny Meets Hawk, I think, is an album that needs more attention, more love.
I think a lot of people are going to go out and look for that album and stream it, or go buy it as soon as they get off this show. I certainly am going to. I love all the people on there, and I maybe have like 10 Sonny Rollins records. I have an even collection of highlights from all the greats, but I don't. Do you collect records first of all, or are you CDs versus LP guy?
I'm more of an LP collector.
Do you have like all or 50 of his records? I mean, he's got a zillion records. You have most of them, or
well, yes, I do. I do have them. I can't say I have them all on vinyl.
Right.
I have a great many of them on vinyl, though, and
I get 10 or 15. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. Yeah, I should have every Sonny Rollins record on vinyl. Of course, they're not all on vinyl, so the ones that are on CD, I have on CD. But yes, I think, needless to say, I've listened to every Sonny Rollins album.
Okay, here's somebody piping in off the internet. Thank you, Mike. So Speaker's Corner did a reissue of Sonny Meets Hawk. All these albums are hard to find at good prices if you're talking about the originals, but these reissues are often wonderful. So thank you, Mike Weber, for that notice on that record.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's mention another record. I showed this record when you and I were talking, but I don't think I showed it to the viewers. So I opened this up the other day and said, "Oh, I didn't realize Aidan wrote some of the liner notes through this. Let me breeze through those, and then I'll go read the book." And the liner notes in here are massive. Are they taken from the book, or is it a separate piece of writing?
The liner notes are to some extent repurposed in the book, although there's a lot more in those liner notes than appears in the book.
This is maybe the longest set of liner notes from a jazz record. It's thousands of words, and I got through half of it. So for those that don't know, this was
if you look at the Louis Armstrong Mosaic box set that came out about a year ago, you'll see much longer liner notes. Okay. I'll tell you
that. Okay, you're in the top 5 or top 3, maybe, which is good enough. So this is a record that sort of started my relationship with Zev Feldman, who I've done a few things with over the years, and this came out just after Sonny's 90th. This is a 3-record set recorded in Holland back in '67, and always, anything that Zev does has incredible detailed liner notes, beautiful photography, etc. I just thought I'd show that. No particular reason, but do you have anything to say about working on that project that is we might want to hear about? What were your experience working on that one?
Yeah, it was an honor to work on that project. One thing I can say about it is that before it began, I had already interviewed drummer Han Benink and bassist Ruud Jacobs at Ruud's home in the Netherlands.
Wow.
For this book. So I'd been in touch with...
You flew out there just to meet him, or did you have other stuff going on in Europe?
I did. Well, I also did some other interviews and had some other meetings in the Netherlands. And I went to Norway and I did research in the National Library of Norway in Oslo. I was in Spain and I met up with a drummer that had performed with Sonny, who lives in Madrid. And I also went to Germany, and I went to the Jazz Institute Darmstadt, which is one of the finest jazz archives in the world and has one of the most extensive periodical collections for jazz research in the world. So that was very important to this
Sounds
project.
like an amazing trip.
Also, it was not too long before the birth of my first child. So it was what
Your
some
wife
people
wasn't
refer
real
to.
excited about that.
She was. This was kind of, it wasn't a research trip for me. We exclusively. She also was presenting at a
Terms of being
conference
away
out
from
there.
her. Yeah.
I know we were together that whole period. That was,
Oh,
I
she
guess,
was
what
with you.
she was. Oh, she was with me. Yes, this was
Oh, okay.
both
That I didn't realize. I thought you were
what many
with
people
her.
refer to as a baby moon, kind of before your
Yeah.
baby's born, and also a work trip for both of us.
Well, that sounds like
But
an amazing trip for both of you.
yeah, so I was one of the first people to hear the material that was released on
Mhm.
Rollins in Holland, because Rude took me out to his studio, and we listened to the whole thing.
Was that before it was being contemplated for release?
Yes, I
Or
believe so. I believe
Huh.
so.
Interesting.
Well, there was some contemplation of it.
But I mean, when Zev was actually working on the,
I think this was shortly before Zev Feldman got involved.
Mhm.
So, it's an honor to work with Zev and to have been involved with Resonance Records that released this great album, and so many others. But yes, I was just blown away when I first heard this tape. And it was sitting in the vaults. It was recorded, and just nothing ever happened with it for various reasons. And due to the work of people in the Netherlands, such as Frank Jochimsen, who is instrumental in this recording, it finally was able to be released. And it meant so much to Han Bennick and Ruud Jacobs to have the opportunity to perform with Sonny. And at the time that this recording was made, Han Bennick and Ruud Jacobs, who came up together, were going in different directions. And Han Bennick was a co-founder for an influential avant-garde group called the ICP.
I'm familiar with them.
And Ruud Jacobs was going deeper into what I guess we might call inside playing. Of course, in my liner notes, I try to collapse that binary between inside and outside. But at this time, Han Bennick and Ruud Jacobs were not, not at first glance, not at first listen, playing the same kind of music anymore. And Sonny Rollins was able really to bridge whatever divide was between those styles, because his vocabulary is so large, and he doesn't believe in these distinctions between genre, because he embodies all of it. So when you listen to this album, you can hear that. You can hear it. And we also discussed that leading up to this release. But yes, I'm honored to have been involved with that release. And also, there are great photos in the package.
Beautiful release. Hard to get your hands on a copy today on vinyl. Limited edition, but the CD is available also. Well, we're at the top of the hour. I think you and I could go on for many more hours, but let's not, because we'll get back to our daily lives here. So let's sign off in just a second here. But folks, the book is not going to be out until January 6th or something.
It's out. It's out.
Okay, where did
it's
I see
out.
it? Well,
it came out December 6th. It is out in the UK on January 19th.
19th. Okay. So you can get your hands on this, folks. If it's not in bookstores yet, it will be any second, and it's available on Amazon. Massive 700 pages detailing Sonny's life in detail. And I also noticed the liner notes were not the liner notes, what do they call them? The footnotes were too big to put in the book. Is that a thing now, or is that just something that is because of your writing style? 400 pages of footnotes.
I've seen it before, but yeah, this is just material that I think some people out there might be interested
for the scholars
in having.
Scholars who want to go deep. Those footnotes are available free on the website of the publisher. But
I wouldn't start by reading the footnotes.
No, don't. If you're of the scholarly inclination and you want more details, start with the 700 pages. But I looked at both of them in preparation for this. Aidan, I think it's time to sign off. So thank you very much for spending an hour with me. Good luck on the book.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to thank you for having me. You know, I've been a big fan of everything you're doing here at the Vinyl Rundown.
I can't believe I have fans, but thank you for saying that. And I look forward to finding more interesting musicians and folks that I can help promote their stuff.
Yeah, well, I'll be here for it.
Excellent. Yeah. Keep in touch. Thanks very much, guys. We're going to sign off now.
All right. Happy New Year.
And